Hi, today we're looking at subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. Subtracting fractions and mixed numbers use the same rules as adding. So if you remember what those rules are, we're going to apply them again today. If you're not sure or you're not remembering, let's go through those steps one more time. And you can see that we have an example to the right that we're going to walk through as we go through the steps. Step number one is to get a common denominator. So take a look to the right and you can see that our original problem is 5 3/4 minus 3 1/2. At this point, our denominators are 4 and 2. They are not the same. So just like in addition, the first thing we need to do is to get common denominators. The common denominator here that we can use would be 4. So if you look to the right, I'm making my denominators both a 4. In this first one, I don't have to change my 3 because I'm just multiplying by 1, so I leave this a 3. And in the second fraction, 2 times 2 is 4, and 1 times 2 is 2. So that's how I get my equivalent fractions. Notice I did nothing with my whole numbers. After you have your common denominators, step number 2 says to subtract your numerators. So looking at our example, we would do 3 minus 2, which is 1. Step number 3 says to keep the same denominator. This is the denominator that we made the fractions into. In our example, we made them into a 4. That's why we left our denominator down here, a 4. Step number 4 is to subtract any whole numbers. So in our example, 5 minus 3 is 2. And step number 5 will always be to simplify when you're dealing with fractions. And 2 1/4 cannot be simplified, so our final answer is 2 1/4. So let's take a look at a couple. The first thing I'm going to do on this first one is I'm going to rewrite these fractions vertically. So I've got 9/5 minus 5/8. Step number 1 is to get a common denominator. My common denominator that I'm going to pick here is 40. I multiply 5 times 8 to get 40, and 9 times 8 is 72. I multiply 8 times 5 to get 40, and 5 times 5 is 25. Now it's time for us to subtract our numerators. So we're subtracting 72 minus 25, and I'm going to treat these just like whole numbers. So I need to borrow from my 7, make that a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. 6 minus 2 is 4. So I end up with 47, and I keep the same denominator, which is 40. I have no whole numbers that I need to worry about here, so now I just need to look to see if I can simplify. Well, 47 over 40 is an improper fraction. I'm going to go ahead and change that to a mixed number. 40 can go into 47 one time with 7 left over, and again we keep our common denominator of 40. So my final answer is 1 7/40. Let's take a look at this next one. Again, I'm going to start by getting these numbers written vertically. And I need to get a common denominator. Well, it just so happens our denominators are the same as our previous example, so again, I'm going to use the common denominator of 40. I multiply 5 times 8 to get 40, and 4 times 8 is 32. I multiply 8 times 5 to get 40, and 5 times 5 is 25. Don't forget to bring that whole number over also, or at least don't forget to put it in your answer at the end. Now it's time for us to subtract our numerators. So again, I'm going to treat these just like whole numbers. I need to borrow from my 3. 12 minus 5 is 7. 2 minus 2 is 0. Keep my common denominator of 40 and subtract our whole numbers, which 2 minus 0 is still 2. I can't simplify any further, so that's our final answer, 2 7/40. The last thing we need to talk about is regrouping. Just like in our subtracting with whole numbers, there are times that we have to borrow. The same thing applies to fractions, and I want us to take a look at what that looks like. To regroup, take 1 away from your whole number and add it to your fraction. Once you do that, you can then just keep subtracting like normal. Let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to do everything the exact same, starting with writing these numbers vertically. I'm also going to still get my common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and say my common denominator is 30. Because you shouldn't know whether you need to regroup or not quite yet. Right now we're treating this just like a normal subtraction problem. So 6 times 5 is 30, 1 times 5 is 5, 5 times 6 is 30, and 2 times 6 is 12. Here's where you know you need to regroup, because when I go to subtract, you cannot take 12 from 5. That's where we need to regroup, just like with whole numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and borrow 1 from my whole number. I'm going to take that 9, and make it in an 8. The one that I'm borrowing from, I'm going to add to this fraction. Well, remember, to add fractions, we need a common denominator. Since my denominator is 30, I'm going to add 30 thirtieths to 5 thirtieths. 30 over 30 is the same thing as 1 whole, the one that we borrowed. You just make it look like a fraction. So now on top, we end up with 35 over 30. I now can subtract 35 and 12. You've just made that fraction look different. You have not changed the value of any numbers. But now I can subtract. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. Keep that common denominator of 30. Don't forget to subtract your whole numbers, and remember that this is no longer 9 minus 7, but 8 minus 7 because you borrowed 1. So we end up with 1 and 23 thirtieths. That can't be simplified anymore, so that's our final answer. Let's try this last one. So again, I'm going to rewrite this vertically. And now I need to get a common denominator. A common denominator I can use here is 8. So I'm going to leave the second one alone and leave it a 5. 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm going to do 1 times 4 and get 4. Here's where we need to borrow, because I can't take 5 away from 4. So just like before, I'm going to come to my whole number. I'm going to borrow 1 from it. This is now a 2. And the one I'm borrowing, I'm going to add to this fraction. So since my denominator is 8, I'm going to make this 8 over 8. When I add that, I'm running out of room here, this now turns into 12 over 8. I can now subtract 12 minus 5 is 7, keep my denominator 8, and subtract your whole numbers. So that's how we subtract fractions and mixed numbers with regrouping. Good luck.